What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and it's Monday, which means it's time to talk through my top 10 lessons learned and takeaways from week 6 of the fantasy football season as we project forward to week 7 and beyond. This is where I look through all of the stats, usage, trends, so you don't have to spend hours looking at box scores. Now, first up, we have the rookie receiver report. As always, if you come here for the rookie receiver report, make sure you leave a like, make sure you subscribe. And first up here, I will say, before we even mention any of the receivers, this is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you check them out. They have Boostober going on where they just have boosts across the board all October long, every single day that you can go check out in the Pick'em lobby when you use promo code RON. They will match your first deposit up to $1,000. I'll have links to that in the description and the comment section down below. Now, first up here, let's sort of break down what the rookie receiver report is. I know most of you guys probably know what it is by now, but I take all the rookie receivers with 60 or more routes run. I just sort of bump that up as we go throughout the season, but 60 or more routes is the threshold right now. And you can see here, we have their route percentage from week 4, 5, and 6. That is just on a drop back, on a pass play, are you running a route, right? Of course, we want that player on the field running a route during a pass play. And then we have targets per out run. Are you commanding volume on a per route basis? Yards per out run. Are you commanding efficient yardage on a per out basis? First downs per out run. Are you moving the chains? Are you a engine in your offense? And then PFF grade, that's just the film grade based off of PFF. Anything over an 80 plus is usually really, really good and a very strong indicator of future success. Now, at the top here, we're just going to kind of go top to bottom, let you know if we sort of jump around here. But you, of course, have Brock Bowers and Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers has been hurt the last 2 weeks, but he blows everyone out of the water in terms of per route numbers, and I just think it kind of sticks out here, 6 weeks into the season. Along with that 82 PFF grade, of course, Brock Bowers has now passed him at an 83.8, which is huge. And then he also is a monster across the board, now has back-to-back weeks without Devontae Adams, and then 10-plus targets on top of that in both games. He's a stud, top 3 tight end rest of season moving forward, and the Dynasty tight end 1. Now, after that, we have Ladd McConkey, and we actually have a good tweet that I think is worth mentioning from Dwayne McFarland, someone who I think is a really, really good follow on Twitter. Ladd McConkey might be a wide receiver 1 in an alternate simulation. His target and air yard shares are in early sun god territory at 26% in terms of target percentage and then 32% of the air yard. So he's not this like low ADOT receiver. He's commanding a lot of targets, and a lot of them are happening. They're not all happening downfield, but it's such an abundant amount of targets that like a 10-yardish ADOT is going to give you a lot of air yards as well and just kind of be a really good usage profile. The issue is, as he says here, the Chargers are a slow-paced run-first offense. They rank 4th lowest in dropback and plays per minute over expectation. So that's not great for redraft. For redraft, he remains a flex. Ladd McConkey is fine. But in terms of dynasty, like if we just look at the entirety of this class, in terms of dynasty, it's, of course, Nabers. Then I think it's Marv. And then after that, there's this tier for me with Ladd, Brian Thomas Jr., and Rome Odunze. If you're still going to stand 10 toes on your priors of he was a top 10 pick, he's a really good player, but he, of course, hasn't had the production or usage we want. But I think Brian Thomas Jr. and Ladd McConkey both deserve to be in a tier, like a mini tier below Marvin Harrison Jr. as like the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 of this class. Now, of course, Marvin Harrison Jr., the guy that we mentioned here, is banged up. There's not really much to say. He got a concussion. He's had this really, I wouldn't call it weird. He's just had a really adult sort of role here where he has like high ADOT, isolated snaps on the perimeter, which is fine, but we want some of the easy stuff, right? That's like what Ladd McConkey can do here for, out of the slot, some screens. Of course, because of the air yard share, he's doing stuff downfield, but we want the easy stuff. Not every single catch and target should feel like a really challenging opportunity, which is why we see a lot of these blow-up weeks from Marvin Harrison Jr. on just like 5 catches, because the catches he does get, they're very valuable, of course, but if we could mix in, some in between, that would be great. We're going to talk about this Cardinals offense in a minute, but I think that would help them a ton regardless. Marvin Harrison Jr. has a concussion. Who knows how long he'll be out for. Then we have Brian Thomas Jr. A little bit further down, of course, after Jordan Whittington, who's on bye. Brian Thomas Jr., not great. He dropped a touchdown, which really, really sucks because a lot of us are probably starting him this week, but still feel just the same about him, right? 20% plus targets per out run, 2+ yards per out run. That's everything we could ask for. His PFF takes a hit, but this entire Jaguars offense just looked awful this past weekend. I have a hard time putting much stock into Brian Thomas Jr. On like one down game when he was on an absolute tear through the first 5 games. Then we have Xavier Worthy. He was on the Monday night game last week, so we didn't get to talk about him. He did set a season high in targets with like 5 or 6 before the bye. He's on bye this week. The hope is, right, the per out numbers here, 13.5% targets per out run, 1.27 yards per out run, and like 5.7% first downs per out run. Those are all really, really brutal. We need those to be better. The hope is off of the bye, he will be more involved. Someone else we're going to jump around for is Rome Odunze over here, where you can see route percentage is still there. They beat up really bad on the Jaguars in London. But if the panic meter is, red to green, or no, green to red, green is no panic, red is sound the alarms, he is getting towards the orange part of yellow where something has to happen here. And I say that as someone that has a lot of him in redraft. I have like a share or two in Dynasty, but I know it's a high volume passing offense and it's definitely spread thin, right? Where you're getting a lot of these ancillary pieces of, of course, the 2 receivers in Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, but then you're also getting Cole Kmet, and you're getting some Roshan Johnson, you're getting some DeAndre Swift, and it's getting worked around a ton. It was a game script where they beat up on the Jaguars, didn't have to pass the ball a ton, but you can't have under a 60 PFF grade, you can't have a 1.16 yards per out run. Like, these are rookie JSN numbers, and he's kind of, like, we're going to talk about him later, he's rebounded okay, and he's done whatever, but JSN, I have a hard time seeing how he gets, like, top 5 Dynasty wide receiver. Those were your hopes and dreams when you drafted Rome Odunze in redraft or Dynasty. The funny part is when you draft him in redraft, the big concern for me at least was that we would see so much two tight end formations and 3 tight end formations, which we saw from Shane Waldron over in Seattle, right? That's why Noah Fant hasn't been fantasy relevant until this year, after he came there from the Broncos, because we would have a lot of Will Dissly and a lot of like Farrell Brown and like random guys in that tight end rotation. But he comes to the Chicago, and we're seeing 3 wide receiver sets more than we've ever seen from Shane Waldron, and Rome Odunze still isn't getting home. So it's scary, but we're going to talk about it in a little bit. Caleb Williams is getting better. There's better days will be ahead. I just think he's probably better in best ball. I don't know at this point that there will be a matchup where it's like, hey, it's time to start Rome Odunze, because it seems like it's kind of happening just randomly. All we got was the big game the week before the Rams game. Can't remember who it was against. It was like the Colts or somebody. It was a very, very easy pass defense. Then we have Xavier Legette, who is right here. He, of course, left last week with an injury. It was minor. Comes out here. He scores a touchdown. He now has 2 touchdowns in his 2 last full games of football since, leapfrogging Mingo. The per out stuff isn't great, but everything's fine. He's moving the chains fine. He's not super efficient, but he's putting together some good box scores. Then you have Jalen Coker, who I'm super impressed with. This was a guy that we really, really liked coming out. He was in my stashes video for rookie drafts. I don't usually like undrafted free agents, but he was Steve Smith's guy. He goes to Steve Smith's team, then the Panthers, that he has like a little bit of pull in, and he's already, right, so 64% of the routes last week, but that was really only because Legette goes down. But he's out here 75% of the routes. He improves on that because he fully leapfrogged John Mingo, who this team sunk a second-round pick into just last year. The UDFA has now jumped him in the depth chart. That's really, really impressive. 1.61 yards per out run, 9.8% first downs per out run, 70-plus PFF grade. For a UDFA in like his second game with meaningful snaps, that's huge. Again, I don't know if he's going to be usable in redraft, but in Dynasty, if he's on waivers, he needs to be on rosters. Then we'll talk about Devon Vele, man. This one is a tough one to wrap my head around. He had a big week 1. Then he has an injury for the rest of the year. Comes back this week in week 6. Looks good again. He gives you like 12 PPR points on the season. 20% plus targets per out run. 1.95 yards per out run is really good as well. Not moving the chains in terms of first downs per out run, but for a like day 3 guy, that's also good. And he's probably more interesting. This is one of the rare rookies that is more interesting in redraft than Dynasty, because he had like a 2-year, I was talking with someone on Twitter, he had like a 2-year mission before college. So he's 26, turning 27 in December. So I don't even really know what to do with that kind of profile. That's like Brandon Whedon type of stuff here, but he's good at football. I just don't know what his ceiling is. It's kind of where I'm at with him. Then we'll talk about A.D. Mitchell, who is it's just the same story. Run a quarter of the routes, earn a ton of targets, 30% plus targets per out run. He had 4 targets this week on limited routes, but until we see him get to 70% plus of the routes, you can't start him. But I'm still very bullish long-term in terms of Dynasty. Speaking of the Denver wide receivers, right, we just touched on Devon Vele. We have Troy Franklin back in the mix here. He goes from 22% of the routes up to 68%. He is now, climbed up the depth chart, become like the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 next to Cortland Sutton, between him and Devon Vele. He scores a touchdown in this game. He doesn't look as incapable as he's looked. The targets per out run is still 20% plus. we need some efficiency, but this was a step in the right direction. Then you have Jalen McMillan. He's back from injury. You have to assume he is above my head here. You have to assume that he's still working back from the injury, but it's not great that he's running only 15% of the routes. We'll see how he kind of ramps up from here. But there is a chance that Sterling Shepard has kind of taken his role as the wide receiver 3. We shall see. And then I will say the next one is Jalen Polk. Now, this one's rough. In terms of the panic meter, he is on full red at this point. The first game with Drake May, that's the big point for him, right? He has 2 big plays called back the last 2 weeks. He comes in here, Drake May time for Jalen Polk to get loose, and he runs just 69% of the routes after being above 87% the last 2 weeks. So he kind of gets a demotion. Kayshon Boutte is running routes ahead of him. You also have a little bit of a rotation here where there's 4 different wide receivers all running 20 or more routes, none of them really hitting that 90% plus route participation rate, right? Where it's, I believe it was Boutte, it was Polk, it was Douglas, and it was Bourne as well, Kendrick Bourne. So tough for Polk, man. Tough for Polk. He's commanding targets, I guess, 14.1% targets per out run, but we need something better than, losing snaps to Kayshon Boutte. I did want to look up like his actual stat line this week. Yeah, 4 targets for 1 catch and 4 yards. I mean, just brutal stuff. He's turned 7, 6, 10, 7. He's turned 17 targets over the last 3 weeks into 5 catches for like under 50 yards. It's really not good. You do have to start questioning if Jalen Polk can actually play, which we're getting to that point in the year where you have to start asking yourself that question with a lot of these rookies. We did have JT Sanders, who's he's all the way on the bottom in terms of receiving grade. Below me, him and Theo Johnson. Nothing really sticks out about either. JT Sanders is only getting called up because Tommy Tremble has been hurt, but it's a positive that he's had 12 targets over his last 2 games with Tommy Tremble hurt. So JT Sanders is kind of a guy. He's commanding targets a little bit. At 14.9% targets per run, not bad at all. That's a good number, especially for a tight end. But we're getting no efficiency, and I do think the minute Tommy Tremble comes back, he will get relegated to kind of a two tight end set guy. Jermaine Burton, he's not on the list, but he was a healthy scratch with Charlie Jones and Trenton Irwin both healthy. Brutal look. I don't know. He's interesting because his upside was like, Josh Gordon, like knucklehead that could just be an absolute dog, but his floor is like he's trending towards like an Antonio Callaway, where it's like, this guy, when he's out there, is sick, but he's just a knucklehead in the film room or whatever. But like, as always with that kind of thing, I don't know the guy. I'm not in the building. But Jermaine Burton trending down there. And then that's it. Anybody I didn't mention is either on bye or they have an injury, or I just didn't really feel like they were worth mentioning at all. Now, moving on to the rest of our lessons learned here, we have number 2, the Packers with everyone healthy, because this was the interesting point. Is we actually kind of had, I wrote this down, we had a brutal run out for Dontavion Wicks, right? Where we come into this year really good on a per out basis in terms of first downs per out run, yards per out run, everything that we want. He comes out here, looks, he's okay. He's still earning targets, but he's really inefficient. He's dropping balls all over the place. And right when it's, rocket ships up for Dontavion Wicks, Christian Watson's hurt. Romeo Doubs is demanding more targets, which I don't really know the validity of that, by the way. I don't know what's going on with Romeo Doubs. That is an interesting development. So he comes in, wheels all the way up. Last week, dud. This week, he gets injured. So Dontavion Wicks, I hate to say this as someone that recommends dropping a lot of fab on Dontavion Wicks, but in these shallower leagues, right, 10 to 12 guys, like 5-player bench, if you got to drop Dontavion Wicks, you absolutely can. But again, I'm not dropping anybody willy-nilly, but it is pretty brutal here. But this Packers offense is great because of Jordan Love. He now has multiple games of 4+ passing touchdowns this season. He's the only one on this list despite missing 2 games. He's just a monster, dude. He had that one of the touchdowns to Romeo Doubs off his back foot, pressure in his face, just an absolute prayer YOLO ball. And somehow with Jordan Love, he just makes those work. The same thing he did with Jaden Reed last week, triple coverage versus the Rams. He is, almost the perfect reincarnation of a Packers quarterback. He doesn't have that same Rodgers, how Rodgers just doesn't throw picks at all. But he has the arm talent. Like, he is this like Favre Rodgers kind of hybrid with his own mix and has all the tools. Really, really fun. And I think in terms of like rest of season, he's now up there as like a top 5 to 6 quarterback rest of season. Like, I would say he's certainly above Dak, certainly above, probably above CJ Stroud at this point as well. Probably above, I think him and Joe Burrow is close, but that top 6 conversation, him versus Kyler is very close as well. Because he's not going to get there on the ground, right, like the rest of these guys. But if he's going to keep having these games where he throws 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, he threw 30 plus last year, he's going to be a really good starting quarterback in fantasy. Then we also have, just in terms of like what the offense looked like, even with Dontavion Wicks getting banged up, we have a tweet from Ryan Heath here. 18.8% of the targets for Jayden Reed. It is worth mentioning for Jayden Reed. He left the game at one point with an ankle injury. He did come back, but he's a top 8 wide receiver in points per game. Again, I keep saying this with Jayden Reed. I do not care. I'm somebody, you guys know, I love the expected points per game, the usage, all of that. We're going to look at usage in this video, but with Jayden Reed, throw it all out. I do not care if he's the wide receiver 69 in expected points per game. He's going to go out there. He's going to score. He is a top 8 wide receiver in points per game. I don't care what his target share is. I don't care what his route share is. If Jordan Love is healthy and Jayden Reed is healthy, Jayden Reed needs to be in your lineup no matter what. Now, the issue is the rest of the wide receivers aren't really startable, right? A 12% target share for Watson's not going to do it. Neither for Dobbs. I know that they both scored touchdowns, but you're flexing these guys chasing touchdowns, which is fine, but they're not strong flex starts that you probably drafted a guy like Christian Watson to be. Tucker Kraft kind of gets lost in the shuffle in this game, but he's still the same back-end tight end 1 where you're just praying for a touchdown, which, considering how weak tight end is at this point, I think that that's absolutely fine. Now, flipping over to the other side of this game, we do have Arizona's offense, which I had a lot of questions. I always open it up to my Discord on the Patreon where I just ask, for the 10 lessons learned video, what do you guys want to hear about? A lot of people are like, what's going on with the Cardinals offense? And it's a little bit tough. This was from September 29th, so not even this week, but this has been a theme for the Cardinals this week. They have first drive of the game, 4 drives, 4 touchdowns. Cardinals every drive after that, 31 drives, 5 touchdowns. So they kind of come out and their first 15-play script is really good. And if they can't build a lead off of that 15-game script or 15-play script, they can't dominate the game that they'd like to dominate the game, and then that's when things start to falter. I'm not saying that that's what we saw here, but we have been seeing a lot of slow starts, a lot of weird stuff with the Cardinals. But at the end of the day, it's still Kyler Murray at quarterback. They're still 13th in EPA per play, which is just offensive efficiency. So that's fine for me, and I'm not panicking on anybody on this team. Now, of course, James Conner goes down with an injury. Marvin Harrison goes down with an injury. 2 things to definitely monitor. I will say Marvin Harrison Jr. goes down. I already had Trey McBride as a top 3 tight end rest of season. He's still that. He's a tight end 2 in usage. He's yet to have a game under 6 targets. He's also yet to have a game with a touchdown. So the volume is there. The touchdowns will be here soon. And then all of a sudden, Trey McBride is an absolute smash. And then, of course, James Conner banged up. And we get Trey Benson's it was supposed to be Trey Benson's, we see it on Red Zone. James Conner goes down, and everyone like me that liked Trey Benson this year were like, okay, it's Trey Benson time. And that was just not the case here, where we actually saw, I think that I have a tweet here. We actually saw, do I not have it? But we actually saw Trey Benson come out. He only had 5 carries. 4 of his 5 carries came when Conner was getting taped up on the sideline. DeMarcado mostly played in the second half with the Cardinals chasing points, ending up with a 21.9% target share. So we actually saw a lot more Emari DeMarcado. Yeah, Emari DeMarcado ended up with 53% of the snaps. Trey Benson only 19%. So that's brutal. When we are stashing these handcuffs on our roster, the whole point is that when the starter goes down, he is now elevated and is the top dog. Well, that's not there if we are going to get a split of 50-50 where Trey Benson's the between the tackles guy with DeMarcado as the 2-minute drill, passing down, all of that back, and we start to split things 50-50 because then Trey Benson is in a clear start when you're kind of stashing him for that reason. So I will say, based off this usage, if you want to drop Trey Benson, you can, but I also think that you should hold just because James Conner is banged up, and we could see a role grow for Trey Benson, but I think that it's pretty bearish just given what we saw this week. Our third takeaway is just, I wanted to touch on some rookie QB debuts here. First up, we have Drake May, the first quarterback this year to top 215 passing yards against the Texans. And I think that's the most important part. He played the Texans, an elite quarterback. And even with that, he throws for, 250 plus yards. He threw for 3 touchdowns. He made a beautiful throw downfield to Kayshon Boutte. Just really, really good stuff. He was the QB9 on the week with 21.5 fantasy points. In a rookie QB's debut, as a Jets fan that has seen a lot of rookie QB debuts, that's about as good as it gets, man. 3 passing touchdowns. I know he had 2 picks. He had a strip sack fumble. That's not all great, but in terms of just wanting, you can take the lows, but if you can just get some highs and some, flashing some upside, that's huge. And that's what Drake May did. Of course, the offensive line was still brutal, but we do have some pretty stats out there. I also have one from Rich Rebar here. The Patriots had 4 passing plays of 20 or more yards yesterday. They had a league low 6 of those plays weeks 1 through 5. So 4 plays of 20 plus passing yards last week, aka Sunday. I don't know. I said last week, but you get what I'm saying. We're getting more explosive plays with Drake May, which is huge. The other thing with Drake May, 21.5 fantasy points, so he's good for fantasy football. He's someone I would be stashing. We'll probably touch on him for the waiver wire video tomorrow. He's not somebody I'm like, you got to go jam him in your lineups, but if you are one of these guys who maybe you drafted, I don't know, maybe you drafted a Dak Prescott early in your draft, and he's, of course, underperforming right now, or if a quarterback that is high-end in terms of fantasy gets hurt, Drake May is a good stash. Again, I don't have the confidence to go out and start him this week, but, in a week or 2, 3, 4 weeks, you could be confident with Drake May as a top 12 option because of this. This is the single most, for fantasy football, this is the single biggest takeaway here from the Drake May start. This is scramble per dropback. So what I've found in terms of fantasy football over the years is, I don't have it on me. I really should have pulled this up for you guys. I always pull it up on streams, but Justin Herbert is as good, if not better of an athlete than Josh Allen or Cam Newton, whoever you want. Or you can look at Andrew Luck versus Cam Newton's combine, and Andrew Luck was the better athlete. The thing is that rushing in the NFL for quarterbacks is much more tendency than it is athleticism. Even if you're fast and you're big and you're strong, doesn't mean you're going to run the ball, because it's really a tendency thing. If a play's not there, if you can't extend it, are you going to throw it away? Are you going to hit the check down? Are you going to take off with your feet? That's a lot more tendency than it is, talent. And Drake May, the thing that we loved about him coming out of UNC is that he ran the ball a lot. Some people thought, maybe it'd be like a Baker Mayfield thing where, and the most political way I can say is that some of these white guys, the athleticism doesn't transfer, and you have to kind of alter your game a little bit, like Johnny Manziel. Drake May, I think, looked good in terms of that yesterday. 5 carries, 38 rushing yards, nothing crazy, but 13% scramble rate per dropback. That'll fall down to a mean of probably it'll probably settle between that 8 to 10% area, but that's really good. That's behind just Jaden Daniels, ahead of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. If you are in any rushing category as a quarterback in a cohort of Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson, I'm listening. So that's what makes Drake May so fun in terms of upside, is that the scrambling is there, the tendency is there in the NFL. We'll see how this develops. Again, only resulted in 38 rushing yards, but the tendency is there. If we can get some rushing touchdowns, some big rushing plays, that will be absolutely huge for both his floor and his ceiling. Now, with Drake May, I do want to note, again, 3 turnovers. It wasn't perfect. Here is your EPA and completion percentage over expectation chart, which is just a decent measure of quarterbacks, right? You have Daniels, Burrow, Donald's been great, Goff, Purdy, all in the top right. It's not the perfect chart by no means, but you can see Drake May is in this Anthony Richardson, Bo Nix, Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, Tyler Huntley area. That's not amazing. So from a real life perspective, he wasn't amazing, but again, he showed the flashes of upside, and that's really all I'm looking for at this stage in the game. Now, in terms of the New England offense, we talked about Jalen Polk. The wide receiver to own for me is definitely Demario Douglas. He leads the team with 9 targets. He's had 9 or more targets in 3 of his last 4 games. Over that stretch is the wide receiver 22 at 13.1 points per game. We'll probably talk about him tomorrow on the waiver wire show. Demario Douglas is a must-add. He's like another Wan'Dale Robinson, which is just fine. Also, a huge shout-out to Hunter Henry. Just 4 targets here, but he turned that into the tight end 7 on the week. I believe he scored a touchdown as well. And he had 5 targets this week. I know PFF says 4. Some of these sites do it differently. On Sleeper, he has 5, which was his second highest of the season. So that should be fun. And then something else for the rookie report that I didn't mention. Javon Baker is healthy and active at this point. Really, really not good. He's trending towards face planner, complete non-factor at this point. It's only 6 weeks in, so maybe he gets activated towards the end of the year, but really not good for Javon Baker. Then we also had the Pats running backs. Of course, there was no Ramondre Stevenson. It was supposed to be Antonio Gibson, absolutely wheels up, but this defense was really good. They held Gibson to 1.5 yards per carry. He ends up with 17 opportunities, which is fine. He gets the Jaguars next week, who are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to running back, so that should be a good matchup if Ramondre misses time. And he had, he's splitting about 66 to 33 with Hasty up until the 4th quarter where it was a blowout. So I think that's absolutely fine. Now we can definitely talk about the Texans. Of course, Mixon's in there. He looks great. Now has 25 plus PPR points and 100 plus rushing yards in both of the games that he has played at full health. I will say, to be fair, those have been versus the Jaguars and the Pats, 2 teams allowing the top 5 most fantasy points to running backs, but still, he's looked good. Now, the more important thing with the Texans to touch on is the pass catchers, right? Because we have no Nico Collins. How do the Texans look moving forward without Nico Collins? And this is kind of what it looked like. We had 9 targets for Tank Dell, 8 for Schultz, 7 for Diggs. They were up big, so it was a lower volume game, but it's nice to see how consolidated this is, right? We have Tank, Diggs, Schultz all accounting for what? 7 plus 8 is 15 plus 9, 24 of 29 targets. Like, that is about as good as it gets for fantasy football. I know Schultz didn't get home, but if he's going to be in the top 3 like this every week, he is going to be a borderline must start moving forward. Maybe that's over the top because he hasn't been that great as a player, but the opportunity will be there, and the bar is very low at tight end. And then Diggs was the wide receiver 11 this week. Dell, the wide receiver 14, with 57 yards and a touchdown. Diggs, 77 yards and a touchdown. Both of these guys are top 24 options at worst without Nico Collins moving forward. And then let's talk about the other rookie quarterback debut. We have Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler, he's actually my most owned dynasty player. So I had a quick victory lap. I posted this on Twitter, and it's just funny, right? This was like almost at like halftime. Spencer Rattler looks great, right? EPA per play, amazing. Total EPA, amazing. Completion percentage over expectation, amazing. And then that all just kind of floundered and flopped on his face because you can see from here, he is in that Bryce Young territory by the end of the game. Now, here's what I'll say. Olave leaves early. You're playing against Todd Bowles, who makes life hell for rookie quarterbacks, but he had above a 6% scramble rate, which we saw here. So that's good for his long-term upside. Now, here's what I'll say about Spencer Rattler. This is what you're worrying about. You're never going to put him in your lineup in redraft, but he is a stash for a lot of us in Dynasty, and he's also the quarterback for Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave, which also matters. Can he support those pass-catching options? And did he show that he can be a guy in the NFL to hold on to in Dynasty? I believe he did. Right, 243 passing yards. He looked good through the first half of the game, then kind of fell back, lost his number one receiver. But I was impressed. I thought he looked the part. I thought he looked good, right? Again, like 243 yards isn't amazing, but he didn't look completely helpless like you would expect from a day 3 backup quarterback. I think that he definitely has some juice. He was a fun like film guy. His stats weren't great. He, of course, gets leapfrogged by Caleb Williams at Oklahoma after being like this 5-star prince to his promise. Spencer Rattler goes to South Carolina to like mid-years, but the guy's that grind tape says that he has all the traits of like sitting in the pocket, taking hits, making progressions. So I'm excited for what he can be. I think that this is a pretty brutal matchup to have in your first game against Tampa Bay, but he should have like another 2 to 3 weeks. And again, I think Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave go from like wide receiver 2s to like high-end wide receiver 3s, like not a massive downgrade. And then what else is there to touch on? Oh, yeah. He was at 6.3% scramble rate, which is also good, right? That's this, Jalen Hurts hasn't been scrambling as much this year, but that's this like, Baker area, Bo Nix area. It's not amazing in terms of scrambling, but it'll get the job done for what we need in fantasy. And then we have the Buccaneers backfield on the other side of that game, which I think is worth talking about. Of course, you have Rachaad White out. That's a big deal. But the funny part is we had like such a big day for the Devy folks, which is like, Spencer Rattler, everybody loved after his first year. Kayshon Boutte for the Patriots, who he was supposed to be Malik Neighbors before Malik Neighbors. He was just, he like gambled on himself, and he's kind of a knucklehead in his own right. But then we get Sean Tucker, a guy, he was Bucky Irving before Bucky Irving, like very fun prospect out of Syracuse, went to a smaller school, so NFL teams didn't take him as seriously, but tested well. Athlete, catches passes, kind of reminds me of like almost like a Chuba Hubbard. But like a lot of us always felt that Sean Tucker could play, but the fact that he got no run last year, considering how bad Rachaad White was, it was like, is it over? But he actually looked really good. Now, of course, the guy we're here for is Bucky Irving, who, according to the utilization report over on Fantasy Life, you can see here, he runs 64% of the snaps, still 45% of the rush time. So his rushing, like his carries didn't really go up, but he goes from 37% of the routes to 66%, and that's huge. Now the targets didn't go up because of that, but he's going to be much more of the passing down guy, right? 2-minute drills, third down and distance, all of that will be Bucky Irving, which is nice. But he's still going to have like half of the carries. But as a guy who's, like under 190 pounds, he was never going to get 20 plus touches in a game. He gives you 14 carries, 81 yards, a touchdown, the RB11 on the week, everything you could have asked for. Now, Sean Tucker comes in, 38% of the snaps. He gives you 14 carries, 136 yards, a touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and was the RB1 overall in the week. And that makes this very, very interesting. The Bucs heading into this week, 18th in rushing EPA, which is just rushing efficiency, weeks 1 through 5. And then week 6, they led the league in rushing efficiency, which with Rachaad White has been a issue all year. So I don't know what this looks like when Rachaad White is back in the mix, but I think it's going to be very difficult to keep Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving off the field, considering how bad Rachaad White has been as a pure rusher. So it's going to either become like a really nasty 3-headed backfield. The proper thing would to make Rachaad White like a passing down back only and kind of phase him out. But there's just no way that happens at this point. I think that he just has built up too much goodwill. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. this is a little bit bad for Bucky Irving because we would have liked Sean Tucker to not be good, and then Bucky Irving shows how good he is, and then there's a flip inning where he becomes the 1A to Rachaad White's 1B, and this now muddies the entire thing. But for any game that Rachaad White is out, Bucky Irving's a must start with Sean Tucker as like a fine upside RB3. Then after that, I want to touch on last thing. So this isn't a rookie QB debut, but I wanted to touch on Caleb Williams, where this is to my left, cumulative EPA per play. EPA per play is just offensive efficiency on a per play basis, and it's cumulative, right? So it's week 1, then week 2 is week 1 plus week 2, then week 3 is weeks 1, 2, and 3 all together, week 4. So just, on a cumulative basis, when you add up every single week on top of each other, how is he progressing? And he starts off absolutely brutal, right? I have on the blue line league average, and he just climbs up as he keeps going and climbs up and climbs up. And now this last week, he has now finally climbed over league average as an above average quarterback in the NFL, and that's a really big deal. You also have this chart or graphic from Computer Cowboy Ben Baldwin here that takes into account his percentile of PFF grade and his percentile of EPA per play in a given week, and it's just this rocket ship, man, where he had a bad week 1, bad week 2, and then it just keeps climbing. Now of course Colts, Rams, Panthers, Jaguars, all pretty brutal defenses, but he is looking like a real NFL quarterback. 23 of 29, 226 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, 56 yards on the ground. To me, he's like this top 12 to 15 option at worst the rest of the way, and that's really fun. Really, the next step is to do it against a good defense, which I think is coming. I think it's coming. I think that he, of course, is beating up on bad defenses, but he's putting good stuff on tape, good stats on my spreadsheets. And then, of course, here's the Bears receivers. Everybody was kind of up in arms about what happened here. I have it sorted by yards per out run. We talked about Rome Odunze earlier. Rome Odunze, he at least led this receiver room in yards per out run. It's not great, right? 1.48 is one of those things like the best looking guy in a Walmart. If you're the best receiver at 1.48, are you even the best receiver? I don't know. But pretty brutal stuff. DJ Moore had like this weird eye injury. I don't know what was going on with him. He finishes at 0.61. Keenan Allen 1.28. He scores 2 touchdowns, but it has just 41 yards on the day. Leading pass catcher is Kmet at 70 yards. No one else is over 50. It was just weird. It was really spread out. It was a game where they killed him the entire time. They just wanted to run the ball. And that's probably the biggest concern here for the receivers on the Bears, is that this Bears team just has no interest in wanting to play up-tempo and passing the ball if they don't have to. Their run game has been good as of recently. Their defense is really, really good. I think that that's kind of what has to be understood with how bad the Jaguars played. This Bears defense is for real. So they get into these game scripts where it could be run-heavy and defensive-oriented, and that's scary. I think that that's kind of what happened versus the Rams and why, Caleb ends that game with like 157 passing yards. So that's the scary part for these receivers. But, of course, Cole Kmet, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns, leads the team in targets and catches or ties with Keenan Allen. He is a must-start given how bad the tight end position is. The other 3 receivers are shaky, with DJ Moore being, presumably the number 1 guy moving forward. Then we have, I want to talk about DeAndre Swift as well in this game. He has had a very funny flipping here where he goes from, not even cracking 10 PPR points in the first 3 weeks to going 20 plus the following 3 weeks. Now, of course, 2 of those games come versus the Panthers and the Jaguars, both top 5 in points allowed to running backs, but he's built up enough goodwill to hold this role and be an RB2 moving forward, which I think if you drafted him, you have to be excited about that. And you probably, went from like 0-3 to like 3-3, potentially off of this turn of events here. And then I want to talk about the Jaguars. This was a huge, huge bummer, man. The Jaguars, so here's the issue with Tank Bigsby, is he was brutal last year as a receiver. Like, his cut-up of targets last year was just drops and just like fumbles and interceptions and just like the worst possible outcome on every target for Tank Bigsby happened last year. And I think that some of that is carrying over to this year, where we have, a potential flipping happening. Travis Etienne gets hurt in this game, and, it's supposed to be wheels up for Tank Bigsby. And in a game where Travis Etienne gets banged up, we sit at just 17 snaps to 35 snaps in D'Ernest Johnson. So D'Ernest Johnson pretty much filled in 1-for-1 the Travis Etienne role. That's a huge hit on Tank Bigsby. Now, you're not going to drop him because he's been so amazing. He's still the explosive runner between the tackles that he's been all year. But if he can't absorb any of the Etienne role, then he's just in this like perpetual desperation RB3 you hope scores a touchdown on a long run every week, which is a pretty brutal spot to be in. Now, I will say we touched on Tank Bigsby, we touched on Trey Benson, and this is why people keep asking me, Blake Corum, are you dropping him what? No. Blake Corum is staying on my roster for this reason and this reason only. He passed Ronnie Rivers last week, and we know Sean McVay did not draft Blake Corum in round 3 to have this like platoon approach or Blake Corum be the 1B to Ronnie Rivers 1A. If Kyren Williams goes down, it will be Blake Corum like 70% of the snaps, and that is a very, very valuable role on this Rams offense, right? We've seen it before in the past with guys like even like Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson, and even like CJ Anderson back in the day, and all of these like, for lack of better terms, like bums. You spend the 3rd round pick on Blake Corum, and you start to already increase his snaps ahead of Ronnie Rivers. That is a very, very valuable piece. And I would almost call him a buy, because people are like souring on the fact like Kyren Williams hasn't gotten hurt, like you drafted a handcuff here, but like we're seeing with Tank Bigsby, and I'm not saying it can't be better for guys like Tank Bigsby and Trey Benson, but if you drafted a handcuff and the starter goes down and that handcuff isn't absorbing that role, he's not a handcuff. He's kind of just a roster clogger at that point. Again, I'm not dropping Tank Bigsby, but that's very, very concerning that he can't pick up the snaps that Travis Etienne would leave behind. Now, I want to talk about with the Colts. Josh Downs' supremacy is what I wrote down for this. I've just been absolutely blown away with Josh Downs here, where we can see here the biggest issue with him for me on the entire year has just been like going into the year. I wasn't all that excited about him. I drafted him in best ball a bunch, but in terms of redraft, I only have like one managed league team with him because the role sucks. That's what it is. 86% in the slot, 5.1 yard ADOT. That's brutal, but Josh Downs is a really damn good football player and just kind of, dancing on the nerds' graves. It's really what I would call it. 2.25 yards per out run. Like Wan'Dale is the poster boy. He is this high floor wide receiver 3, 13.1 points per game. That's not going to win or lose you a week. It's just meh, right? And that's Josh Downs' role, right? They're both in that 5 yard ADOT, 80% slot range, but Josh Downs, 2.25 yards per out run to Wan'Dale's 1.41. 34% targets per out run to Wan'Dale's 27.1%. Doubles him up in first downs per out run. So he's moving the chains. He's an engine of this offense. 83.7 PFF grade to Wan'Dale 65.1. So like the difference here is play calling with Shane Steichen. The difference here is Joe Flacco being a more efficient quarterback than Daniel Jones, and then Josh Downs just being a straight up better player than Bijan Robinson. Now, of course, we have Richardson coming back, but I think at this point, Downs is just a really good player. We can see here as well, he leads this team far and away in yards per out run. I know that Pittman has had 2 games with Richardson, but I don't think that should muddy a 6-game sample that much. Josh Downs has been by far and away their most reliable and best wide receiver. And my biggest takeaway here is that Josh Downs moving forward, my rest of season rankings and my weekly rankings will be ahead of Michael Pittman. He is the main guy in this offense. And even with Richardson back, he goes from, he's the wide receiver 14 in points per game as like a wide receiver 2 to a like wide receiver 3 that I'm still playing in the flex even with Richardson. Because I just think that he's that good that Steichen's going to get him involved no matter what. Now, I also wanted to touch on at the other side of this game, the Will Levis, the Will Levis experiment is coming to an end here. If not this week, the next week, and if not next week, then the week after that. It's just you can't keep rolling this out. In terms of an offensive grade on PFF, in terms of EPA per play, which is just offensive efficiency, charted production-based measures of quarterback play made by Ben Baldwin here. He is by far and away the worst quarterback in the NFL right now. And a team in the Colts that have made every passing offense look good. Literally every time a offense plays the Colts, fire everybody up. They held Will Levis to 95 passing yards. And of course, after the game, Calvin Ridley, super annoyed. He gets like 8 targets, catches none of them because Will Levis is bad. He's complaining about how many targets he's gotten. And I wasn't all that interested in Calvin Ridley going into the year. I think he's borderline droppable at this point. When I was doing the research, when we were sort of doing preseason research on Calvin Ridley, I was like, man, like is he, and I hate to say this out loud because I'm not dancing on a guy's grave. I think that he was amazing at Bama. He was amazing as a rookie. He had some good years, but like we might just be like overhyping what Calvin Ridley ever was as a talent. I was looking back like this, like these in the bottom right, that 2023, 2021, 2020, 2019 are his yards per out run in every year. Outside of 2020, where he's next to Julio Jones, Matt Ryan is throwing the ball, 8,000 times. He's not even cracking 1.7 yards per out run. So in 4.5 seasons, he has 2 1,000-yard seasons. He has 1 wide receiver 1 finish. He has 1 wide receiver 2 finish. Only 1 season over 2+ yards per out run. Only 1 season with an 80+ PFF grade. His open score outside of the 1 year wasn't that great. So he has 1 year in 2020 where he was really damn good. He was actually one of my first articles ever written. I think that's how you say that. Or I ever wrote, was on Calvin Ridley year 3 breakout, which was 2020. But like since then, or maybe it was year 2 breakout. I don't know. It was one of the two. But since then, it's just been like, man, we're sold on this guy who's like an amazing route runner and a really good player. But, of course, the gambling thing definitely fed into it. But even that year when the gambling thing happened, his like through 4 to 6 games was absolutely brutal. So I don't know. I think Calvin Ridley's been overrated. Of course, I was even in on him last year and he flopped. I had no reason to really want to buy into him this year, especially because he was more expensive than DeAndre Hopkins even before the Hopkins injury. So just brutal. I think Calvin Ridley is just like not even really startable at this point. You're going to have Mason Rudolph in, but who really cares? With Hopkins, at least, there's some chance that he gets traded. Calvin Ridley's the wide receiver 70 right now, so that's brutal. But yeah, you're hoping Hopkins gets traded, and maybe that gives just, Calvin Ridley all the targets, and that can kind of get him there. But a really brutal look there. I will say, at least Tony Pollard looks good, though. Tony Pollard, Spears goes down. Pollard now has 15-plus PPR points in 4 of his last 5 games. He's the RB 18 in points per game. He's a solid RB2, and that's a nice hit wherever you drafted him. Our 5th takeaway here is what the Eagles look like at full strength. Oh, wow. We are 40 minutes in, and I'm only 4 takeaways in. All right. We certainly did too many notes here, but I don't care. We are breaking down this week through and through. With the Eagles, not super pretty, but they have enough studs that they're at 11th in EPA per play, which is offensive efficiency, which is, just fine. Of course, you have A.J. Brown, 6 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. Shout out to Dwayne McFarland here. A.J. Brown, if you wanted to make the case for him as wide receiver 1 rest of season, I could hear you out. He had 23.6 fantasy points today, or that was yesterday, 38% of the target, 62% of the air yards, and over his 2 full games this season, 36% target share, 23.3 points per game as like the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. Now, of course, 2-game sample, but again, if you wanted to name A.J. Brown as your wide receiver 1 rest of season, I would not laugh at you. Devontae Smith obviously gets home kind of lucky, 364 and a touchdown, but he'll be fine, sort of boom bust. It was a tough Browns defense, so I'm not really putting a lot of stock into the 18 for 47 on Saquon. Goddard gets hurt in this game, which isn't great. But again, A.J. Brown should be good. He's, of course, kind of everything you drafted him to be. You just need him to stay healthy. And then Cleveland is completely broken. They're a brutal watch. Jerome Ford gets hurt in this one. Nick Chubb's returning week 7. So Nick Chubb, I think that he's going to play next week and be somebody you can honestly start, which sounds crazy, but I think the Browns are just that desperate that's going to happen. Then our 6th takeaway is the Cowboys are broken. The Cowboys are just absolutely brutal. It's just tough because you just have to readjust your expectations. Now, I will say the only glimmer of hope for the Cowboys is they did this last year. Really slow start. They get killed on primetime versus the 49ers, and then they go on bye, and then coming out of that bye, they're rejuvenated and the hottest offense in football. That is 100% in the range of outcomes, but from where we stand right now, their offensive efficiency is 25th in the NFL through 6 weeks. Their previous 3 years in 2021 was 7th, 10th, and then 2nd last year. So this has been an offense that we draft every year, right? CeeDee Lamb up top, Dak wherever he goes as these top-end guys on the Cowboys. This is going to be a top 10 offense as long as Dak Prescott is breathing, and that has not been the case so far. So it's just about readjusting expectations there. I think that puts CeeDee Lamb's wide receiver 1 overall case in jeopardy. I think it's just kind of brutal across the board. Dak Prescott becomes a guy that's more of a streamer now than a must-start quarterback. Right? This is supposed to be a huge... I know the Detroit Lions are a good defense, but this is supposed to be a high-scoring shootout-type game, and the Cowboys just came out flat, which is what they've been doing a lot this season. So it's just brutal. Again, can they turn things around? Absolutely. But for right now, you got to look through a different lens with these Cowboys. And then I did want to bring up, Sam Laporta scores a touchdown, but I think this is a good sobering tweet from Dwayne McFarland. 7.8 points per game here is bad. 10% target share, 14% end zone target share. Talented player, but a forgotten man in a crowded Lions offense. He is essentially Tucker Kraft at this point as a low-end boom-bust tight end. That is a pretty brutal thing to hear after your tight end just puts up a touchdown on a big day, but it is what it is. The usage just isn't there. It's tough. If you can sell high, you should. Man, I don't know. I think better days are ahead, right? I think that this might be the start of a little tear for him, but the expectations of he's, for me, comfortably behind at this point, Trey McBride, George Kittle, and Brock Bowers, and then we can start to have a conversation, but no, I'd still put him behind Travis Kelce. Kelce's even, you could talk me into Kelce tight end 1 rest of the season as well. So a guy that you drafted probably as the first tight end off the board, it's not looking great. Speaking of tight ends, our 7th takeaway here is, do we trust Mark Andrews? And my answer is absolutely not. I know people might just see the box score. Mark Andrews scores. He puts up 15 plus PPR points for the first time this year. I got bad news. It's not great, man. 3 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown in this game. 60% of the routes is not going to cut it. We need to have 75% plus to have a real, true difference-making tight end. He hasn't hit that since week 2. Still hasn't hit that. This Ravens team is just kind of embracing this team approach of they're getting Flowers the ball, then Bateman, Likely, Aguilar, even their ancillary pieces of like Charlie Kolar and Justice Hill, and they're spreading it around and they're beating up on teams and they're running the ball and they're playing good defense. So it's just not a situation conducive to Mark Andrews and these guys. I think that Mark Andrews is also buying in because it's a good team here. He's not going to hit the diva stuff of, like, get me the ball, let me get it earlier. Kind of like what Calvin Ridley's hitting right now. I think that he's probably just happy to win, make a couple plays here and there. And it's a tough reality of what it is right now for the Ravens, but that's just where Mark Andrews is at for now. And he's still, if I'm doing rest of season rankings today, I still don't think that he's a top 12 guy for me. It's a really brutal reality, but it's kind of just where we're at. We did have a big Zay Flowers game. He gives like season high 132 receiving yards, 9 catches, all came in the first half. He's coming off back-to-back 100-yard games. The issue is with Zay Flowers and just this Ravens offense is just, they're so good. Like, maybe things slow down, but their defense is so good, their run game is so good that the pass catchers are tough for me to lean on. Outside of, like Zay Flowers to me is like a fringe top 24 guy rest of season because it's tough to really depend on that volume. He's the wide receiver 30 in usage right now. And then the other side of the game, it's worth mentioning, Eckler kind of gets shut down because the Ravens are such a good running defense, but he, according to the utilization report this week, killed Jeremy McNichols across the board, led in literally everything, like a 70-30 split there. Of course, not exactly 100% in terms of the snaps because they're going to have some pony personnel, but Eckler dominated the backfield, and he gets Carolina next week, who is like, the worst defense versus the run or against fantasy running backs. That makes it wheels up for Austin Eckler next week if Brian Robinson can't go. My 8th takeaway, readjusting our Bijan Robinson expectations. And this one was just brutal because it's tough, man. It's tough. Look, I won't take anything away. Algier is a good running back, but I also find it crazy to give him 3 more carries than Bijan Robinson in any setting. In a game where Bijan scores 2 touchdowns, has a better yards per carry. I don't know. There was they were almost like begging Carolina to stay in this game. They had it was towards the end of the game. It was a goal to go situation, and Algier is out there for all, 3 snaps of the goal to go situation. Algier gets 2 carries up the middle, doesn't convert on either of them. They pass, they miss it, and they just end up kicking a field goal. A team better than Carolina, they were only up by like a possession there. It's just, I will never understand it. I know, like, it's being greedy as a Bijan guy to be like, give him 3 touchdowns. But I've fought this war on Twitter. I have more Algier in managed leagues and in best ball. Like, I am exposed to Algier. I promise that this is not just me defending Bijan bags. I drafted far more Brees than Bijan. It's frustrating knowing how good Bijan is and how these running backs' careers go to be wasting his prime like this is I guess, like, my gut feeling here of, like, this should be, year 2, Christian McCaffrey, year 2, all of these guys who break out. I'm trying to think on top of my head, but this should be a monster season. And he gets 2 touchdowns, and he averages 6.3 yards per carry versus the worst defense in the league. And you're also getting this Kyron Williams passing game usage where he gets 4 targets, but he only gets 10 receiving yards out of it. It's just frustrating to say the least. What I will say, the saving grace for Bijan in this entire offense is, like, regardless of whatever usage or however many carries that Algier is going to get here, they're 8th in EPA per play. So this is, it was doomsday scenario. We get this usage plus week 1 Falcons where Kirk's not moving and they're like bottom 5 in efficiency. They're going to score points. They showed the last 2 weeks as well that they are capable of shifting a game plan. Like, these are massive W's for Zach Robinson is what I'll say, or just kind of the team in general, is we saw them, pass for 500 yards versus the Buccaneers. Of course, they have Vita Vea up front, so you're not going to run very well against them. They come against Carolina, who is just an absolute revolving door of a run defense. And they say, you know what? We're going to carry the ball 38 times, and we're only going to have 30 attempts in the passing game, which is really nice. So they're adjusting based off of their opponent, and that's good. They're also scoring a lot of points. That's good. I just wish we could make it more 70-30 than, like, damn near a clean 50-50 split here. Then our 9th takeaway is going to be messy backfields. First up, we have the Steelers. First game where Warren's healthy. He didn't really do much, but easy matchup. The Raiders allow the 7th most fantasy points to running backs. Ryan Heath broke it down here. Najee Harris saw his highest fantasy score at 20.2 points, but a season-low carry share at 58.3% and a season-low 11.5 weighted opportunities. So his volume went down, his efficiency went up, but I'm not going to bet on his efficiency just, like, bouncing back all of a sudden. So this is probably a blip on the radar for Najee Harris. I think it's going to be much more of a committee approach moving forward, and maybe even Jalen Warren can carve something out at the top because I just don't see the upside of Najee Harris. Again, looked good in this game, but he came off of like 3 straight smash spots and did absolutely nothing with them. Like, we just talked about the I was going to say, did he play against the Panthers? No, but he played against Dallas, who's bad, and he put up, 3 yards per carry, put up 1.46 yards per carry versus the Colts, who just let Pollard run wild. Just he had 2 smash spots, did nothing with them. And then against the Raiders, with Jalen Warren back and a season low in usage, he does well. I would bet against that being some kind of trend that he's, all of a sudden a good football player. Then we have the Bengals here. Chase Brown in the mix. From where I'm sitting, it seems like he kind of has leapfrogged Zach Moss at this point. Adam Levitan breaks it down here. He saw season highs in snap rate, route rate, share of RB opportunities. Zach Moss also lost a fumble. Chase Brown is better than Zach Moss in terms of every conceivable per carry metric. Chase Brown also had a 53% route share. His previous season high was 37%, so they're trusting him more in passing situations. Really, the only thing Zach Moss has on Chase Brown right now is pass protection, which to me is fine. If it's going to be like a 65-35 split with Chase Brown getting the explosive stuff and, some red zone area stuff, and, he seals this game with a long touchdown after almost losing a fumble and goes out of bounds. So Chase Brown, huge riser right now, has to be an RB2 in rest of season rankings. Then we have the Giants, right? Tyrone Tracy comes out here. He gives you 100-plus yards from scrimmage after going 130 yards from scrimmage last week. He's the RB3 over the last 2 weeks. But I would pump the brakes ever so slightly when Singletary comes back. I saw a tweet. This is what Gretch is actually replying to. Is somebody out there was like projecting like a 70-30 split in favor of Tracy when Singletary comes back. I have a lot of Tracy. I would love to tell you that that's going to happen, but there's just simply no way. Singletary has played good this year. He's up there in a lot of those missed tackles force metrics. Of course, are some of those inflated because Singletary's running style is like slow and him making people miss and, 3 yards in a cloud of dust? Maybe. But Dable has trusted this guy going back to his Buffalo days. He is not just going to relegate him for like a minor injury. I would assume that Singletary will be the 1A and Tracy the 1B, but instead of it being this like 3-man backfield with Eric Gray and Tracy, it'll now be a 2. And instead of it being like 70, I think it was like high 80s%. I think it was like 88% in like week 1 or 2 for Singletary. It'll probably tail off to more like 65-35, but there's absolutely upside for Tracy to like completely take over the backfield. I would just not say it's happened yet. Gretsch kind of touches on that here. From where I sit, 50-50 feels like the high side for Tracy, and I think what Pat noted is extremely important here. We get a lot of deference to Beats, but with all due respect to Art, he wrote this as a speculative tweet. He's not sure of anything either. That's like the original tweet. He was saying like, it's going to be like a 75-25 split in favor of Tracy, which is there's just no way. Thorin said maybe it will happen over the course of the next several weeks, but it would be pretty abrupt to have a guy who's performed capably to return from minor injury to clear backup role. And I agree. He's not just like, Singletary is not going to be nothing. And that's annoying, but it's just the reality of the situation here. And I just want to make sure you guys have realistic expectations. Then we have the Chargers, right? Kamani Vidal, he comes out here, scores a touchdown in his debut, looks good. He's not someone you can start yet because J.K. Dobbins is still the main guy, but this was always the theory. Gus Edwards is washed, which he is. We now have Vidal taking on his role. And then the hope is that, J.K. Dobbins coming off an Achilles. I wish him well. I'd love to see him absolutely ball out. I have him on a team or two. But off of these Achilles, we've seen guys in the past like James Robinson kind of just tail off, where they start strong and they tail off. That's 100% in the range of outcomes for Dobbins, someone who has been injury-prone his entire career. I am 100% rooting for that not to happen, but that's where we're at with Vidal. He is now like a handcuff to Dobbins. Dobbins, though, is like, he's the RB13 in points per game, as said by Dwayne McFarland here, 18.2 fantasy points. And that was against a really good Broncos defense, but the usage was amazing. 70% of the snaps, 47% route participation, and he's like a borderline, like I would call him a top 15 running back rest of the way. They, of course, played the Denver Broncos, who also had Audric Estime available for the first time this year. He did nothing crazy, but like Javonte was just absolutely brutal. Like, let me pull up his stat. Like, his stat line was it's just atrocious. It's tough, man, because I still believe the logic of drafting Javonte Williams, right? We see these knee injuries that are gruesome, right? The ACL stuff. First year back, brutal. Second year back, pretty good. We're seeing guys like J.K. Dobbins bounce back from horrific injuries. Breece Hall bouncing back from his ACL a year ago. It's just not happening for Javonte, and I'm not going to hold my breath hoping that he becomes the player that he was as a rookie in like those first few weeks in year 2. He has 6 carries, 23 yards in this game, 6 targets, 3 catches, 13 yards in this game. He loses a fumble. It's his second lost fumble in the last 4 weeks. I imagine Sean Payton's one of those old school coaches who doesn't love that either. Now, of course, Esme did nothing, right? He gives you 2 carries for 13 yards, but that's 6.5 yards per carry. I think that this is going to be, over the next 3 weeks, I think Esme is going to climb up these percentage numbers. You're going to see Javonte probably stay in as like the pass-catching, pass-protector type, but I think Esme is going to get Like when we look at like running back carry share, my guess would be that Estime gets like 60% plus. I'll put that on record. I think that he gets a 60% plus by week 10. That'd be my guess for Estime. He's someone that has to get picked up because of how brutal Javonte has been. And then our 10th takeaway here, I just want to talk about the Thursday night game. First up, I hate to bring this up, but I do think it's important to kind of recalibrate expectations when it comes to JSN. You guys saw me just flip through like a bunch of graphics there. Can I find the one that I originally was looking for? Yeah, here it is. It's that JSN, who I love. He was a huge target for us this offseason. He was my wide receiver one in that draft class. He has put up 70 plus, and this is an arbitrary cutoff, which isn't good analysis, but 70 plus receiving yards, only one of his 23 career games, is not good. That is not good. He had 1.32 yards per outrun as a rookie. Not good. He now has 1.22 yards per outrun. Even worse in year 2. Of course, 11.8 points per game. He's like the wide receiver 36 in points per game, which is fine, but he's getting there on volume, not efficiency, which is brutal. So I'm panicking completely on what his upside can be in the NFL. He's gone from a guy that I thought could be a top 12 wide receiver in Dynasty, have like, top 15 upside this year in redraft, now being like almost Wandale-ish, where he's like this low ADOT. He racks up receptions. He's not efficient. Like he just scored a touchdown. It's not great. So he's probably even a sell candidate for me because I think some people still have optimism for JSN, but I'm just kind of trying to call what it is at this point. He's kind of just volume-based slot guy for Geno Smith, which is fine, but like if him and Wandale switched places, I actually think that Wandale would score just as much, if not more, PPR points per game, which is just like not good, for a guy that I had a lot of high hopes for. I will say as well, in terms of Metcalf, 2 down games in a row now, but I'm still very bullish. He leads the team in yards per outrun, targets, etc. He's looked good. He's looked fast. I don't really care. Again, this is me talking about the Thursday Night Football. Then, of course, we have Isaiah Guerendo. You have the Jordan Mason injury, which honestly, it seems like a pretty low-grade AC joint sprain, which with extra rest, he might be just fine this week, Jordan Mason, but it's worth talking about. Isaiah Guerendo was, for a lot of you guys that are watching as redraft guys, he was a fun prospect coming into this year, rookie out of Louisville. Weirdly enough, was like the RB2 at Louisville behind Jawar Jordan, I believe. I don't want to talk about my ass here. But he was drafted based on his athleticism, where he is like 220 pounds. Like he essentially had a comparable, if not better, combine to a guy like Jonathan Taylor, right? Like 220, 4.4 speed, explosive, everything you could possibly ask for. But yeah, in his final year at Louisville here, the number one running back was Jawar Jordan with 1,100 rushing yards to Isaiah Guerendo's 810. So that was always kind of the pushback of like, he wasn't even the RB1 in his own backfield. Jawar Jordan, UDFA, who can't even get on the field for the Texans. But regardless, I still think Isaiah Guerendo's a good player. I'm just trying to give you background on who he was coming out. He was like a day 3 pick. But again, combine warrior type of guy. And we already saw that, right? He runs away. And yeah, I think actually John Daigle sort of breaks it down here in terms of his combine profile. But the touches after Jordan Mason left the game, 10 to Guerendo, 6'2", Patrick Taylor. Bias towards any player who can break fantasy football like Guerendo. 24 miles per hour during his 4.33 40 at 6 foot, 221 pounds at the combine. But like that is everything we want in terms of combine, upside, all of that. But it seems like if Jordan Mason misses time, Guerendo would be it'd be like I'd guess like 1A, 1B, like 60-40 split. Shaded towards Guerendo as the main bowling ball, goal line back, short yardage, everything. Patrick Taylor as the passing down back. Both would be ads. I'm not all interested in Patrick Taylor, but they're both worth mentioning. But Guerendo would be like an RB2 in any game that Jordan Mason misses, along with McCaffrey missing as well. And then also Kenneth Walker. We mentioned it last week, but this pass catching element for Kenneth Walker is just absolutely beautiful, man. Like it increases his floor, his ceiling, everything. Where he now has back-to-back games with 8 targets. JJ Zach Reason says here, against the 49ers this past Thursday, Kenneth Walker hit a 16.7% target share. He's had back-to-back games over the 15% mark. He'd been above that mark just 3 times during his first 2 years in the league. So through his first 2 years, he's only been above 15% 3 times. He just did that in back-to-back games with 8 targets. So really good stuff, right? In a game where he has 14 carries for 32 yards, he gives you a rushing touchdown, 8 catches, 37 yards, getting you to 20.9 PPR points. He is the RB3 in points per game at 22 points per game. And his role, the volume in terms of the offense of Seattle, where they just got a lot of plays off and they pass the ball a bunch. if you wanted to talk me into Kenneth Walker RB1 overall, you certainly could. So if you drafted Kenneth Walker, I've had these questions as well. Like, should I trade Kenneth Walker, whatever? No. I'm holding on for dear life. I do not care. He's catching passes. He's looking explosive. He's in an offense that I want pieces of. So I'm not moving off of Kenneth Walker for really anybody. But that's going to do it for us today. I will say things are a little rough. You can see the basement's not what it used to. We don't have the lights on right now. If you're curious, like why I didn't post last Tuesday or why this video is coming out late, the basement's been a shit show. We had a mold issue in July. We got that fixed. Then some leaking started happening last week. It was told to us that there was like a leaky pipe. So now walls are getting stripped down. It's just a whole mess. Walls are getting stripped. There's workers in here all the time. I had to wait to record this like for an hour or so because there was a worker down here. So that's where we're at. I'm going to try and get a waiver wire video out tomorrow. I'm trying to get out as many videos as I can, but I just want to give you guys an explanation for what's going on. Now, I will say as well, once I post this video, I'm going to the Jets game. We'll see how this goes, man. I haven't been to a Jets game since 2018 when they got killed by the Vikings, and I got skull chance on the way out of the stadium, but I am excited. I'll let you guys know how that goes tomorrow. I'll either be very sad in the waiver wire video, or I'll be wearing a Jets jersey talking my shit. So, as always, appreciate you guys watching. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning, make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code RON. I have a link in the description and the comment section down below. Match your first deposit up to $1,000. If you can't support there, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold.